Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us. We're just getting everything set up. If one of you could be so kind as to either post a question in Q&A or raise their hand so that we can know you can hear us, that would be great. Awesome, thank you so much. So we'll get started in just about a moment. We're getting ready to share our screen and get the presentation going. Perfect, awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Christina Olson, and I am super excited to be part of today's webinar and share with you some really interesting learnings that we've had about using science and data with your distributed workforces. I'm a customer success manager here at Rallyware, and my co-anchor for this show today is going to be Dan O'Mara, who is our VP of Sales. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We will be recording this session and we'll have a link that we can share with you later in the week. And also after the presentation, we are going to be taking questions and answers. You can post those questions as we go throughout the presentation into the Q&A section, and we'll get to them at the very end. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Dan, who's going to get kick-started.
Hey guys, thank you very much for joining today. And Christina, thank you so much for joining us. So one of the things we wanted to kind of really focus on today for this episode in the Rallyware webinar series is changing distributed workforce by using both science and data. And we're going to use this framework for today. It's a framework that's very common in the learning space and really behavior change. So we're going to take this concept from learning, just-in-time reinforcement, doing, and results. So when we start with the learning, this is like maybe onboarding a new team member. Maybe it's a brand new with the organization or brand new to the role. Maybe there's a brand new program that's being rolled out, or maybe brand new products that the company is now starting to offer. Just that basic concept of learning. And then from there, we're talking about this concept of just-in-time reinforcement. What we mean by that truly is this continuous reinforcement of that learning that was originally taught. Because, you know, a lot of times you might learn something and then not have to apply that for 6 months, you know, a year, or maybe just be a couple of days. So what we're going to talk about, of course, is this focus on just-in-time reinforcement. Small snippets of information, either delivered in short, timely bursts throughout someone's organization, time with the organization, or really at the time that's needed for them to apply that knowledge. And of course, doing. You know, learning is intended to drive some sort of action. So let's talk about the actual doing part of it. Utilizing, applying that skill, and understanding if we can track that or not, and we'll get into that. And then also results. Use those results, of course, to improve our retention, improve our performance, and really refine our content, our flow throughout that whole process. But first thing we're going to start off with is the science that goes into this learning and the just-in-time reinforcements. And to that, Christina, I'll hand it back over to you.
Awesome, thanks, Dan. I wanted to share with everybody that I changed my shirt and put on lipstick for this presentation, so I'm sitting up straight and I'm super excited and imagining all of you smiling at me as I'm sharing this interesting information with you, because I think it can totally change the way we work in educating and training and developing people in our workforces today, now that we're all distributed across the country. So some things I'm going to talk about are just-in-time learning, microlearning, this concept of constantly reassessing, and how that helps reinforce things for your users, or your customers, or your employees. How we vary the kind of content we give you. Incentives are hugely important in this part of the process, and making those smart incentives is both important for the company, who's implementing them, because there's costs involved, but also for motivating the users on the other end. And then also how you sustain this kind of effort. So the first thing that we're gonna do is I'm gonna see if I can get my remote control to work here. Dan, could you move me forward a slide? For some reason I can't. There we go, great. So just-in-time learning is the concept of making something truly immediate to the user. And think about how on our phone, sometimes you get notifications about something that you need to reorder from Amazon. So sort of that immediate delivery into your phone or the device in your hand. So we want to give you just enough information that you're going to have your interest piqued. We want to make sure that it's appropriate to the person that we're delivering it to. So you're not getting information about a football if what you really just ordered was a hockey stick. So making sure that the information is appropriate. And then whatever we're delivering to you is appropriate for the task that we're asking you to do. We're making sure that the video is appropriate or any of those things, and that it's easily accessible. And so one of the ways we do that is through this concept of microlearning, that we give you bits of information that you can do very quickly. You can focus on a single item. And when you add up all those bits of microlearning, you find out that you've learned a lot about the whole of something, so that you have felt like you've been able to take baby steps towards learning a much bigger thing. We find that interactive training or bits of microlearning is really helpful. So if there's a quiz or a video or something that someone can interact with, that helps a lot. And that it's easy for you to access. So whether it's on your phone or your iPad or your desktop, that it works on all of those devices. So those bits of microlearning all add up to giving you learning that is helpful. And science has proven that if you can do it quickly, you can do it easily, and you can add up all those bits of information, you are going to learn better. So this is where we're using a lot of that science. What microlearning does is that it helps you understand the needs of your audience. So if you have different kinds of learners, we're going to learn what the needs of those people are by how they do these little baby steps. You can incorporate gamification by having badges and rewards. It increases engagement. It allows people to feel excited and as if they have accomplished something. We're going to say a lot about just-in-time learning, because that's one of the things that science and data can help you do, is based on the information that you are capturing, whether that's in your learning environment or just in your database, using that information to drive the right learning at the right time is going to be hugely important. And then finally, people feeling good about the information that they've learned, that they've been able to internalize it. So giving people quizzes and tests or certifications as they learn those bits and pieces helps them feel like they are engaged and progressing, and that they feel good about the work that they're doing while learning. And hopefully with microlearning, it doesn't really feel like work. It feels a bit more like fun. What microlearning doesn't do is it doesn't help you craft the right message for the audience. You have to do a bit of work with the science and the data to make sure that you are sending it to the right person. It's just, you can't just apply microlearning and know that you're going to get to the right audience. You have to use the science and the data. We've also found that in the realm of microlearning, being a bit more casual, being a bit more appropriate to your audience. So knowing the age of your audience, knowing how they might speak, what kind of words they might use, is there a geographic issue, is really helpful. We all have a tendency within our organizations to talk in acronyms, and everybody's got a different acronym for a different thing. And so we find in microlearning, because it's such a small amount of space, people want to shorten that, but using an acronym makes someone stop and have to really think and translate that. So that doesn't work as well in microlearning. Also with microlearning, we do want that interactive bit, but you have to be really careful that you're not just giving them anything. You want to make sure that it is relevant to what you are trying to get them to learn. So don't put a video in for video's sake. You know, don't fall into the trap that everybody learns with video. It's not always true, and some things don't lend themselves to that. And also don't assume that microlearning can do all of the work. Yes, often lots of little tasks can add up, and they do, but sometimes there's a really complex thing that you need to take the time and kind of give them multiple chunks of learning that's a little bit bigger than microlearning. And so don't try and have it be a one size fits all. It'll never quite work. So one of the things that's really important about learning or training is this concept of constantly reassessing. So of course, you always go through these sort of early phases of understanding the skill assessment of your employee or your user, onboarding them, getting some results, learning, and that's where this loop starts. So you reassess, you look at the performance results, and you go back to the learning. You might tweak the learning that you already have. You might find that you are missing a section of training that someone needs to have. You might find you put too many quizzes in, or there's too many videos, and so you edit the content. So this is this constant sort of reassessment to look at the results and see how the training has been absorbed and used by the people taking it, and then reassessing it, go back, learn, and complete that cycle over and over again. And that cycle could be really, really short, depending on your content. Or it might be, take a little bit longer for you to be able to do that assessment. So it really depends on your organization and what kind of training it is, but that cycle will happen either in a very quick one, on a monthly basis you're looking at, maybe you look at it a quarterly basis, but that is an incredibly important part of this whole process, is reassessment. So content variability. We as humans, when you look at the science of learning and what works and what doesn't, is we get bored. As humans, we get bored if you show us the same thing all the time. So one of the great things about this is that on a platform where you're doing training, or if you're delivering it via the web, whatever the method that you have of mixing up the ways that you train your people. So sometimes it's a video, sometimes it's an infographic, sometimes it's a podcast, sometimes it's linking them to a white paper or a book, sometimes it's a quiz. There are just numerous ways that you can switch up your content variability. Sometimes in that reassessment process that I spoke about earlier, you'll find that maybe you did a short video, but actually, in talking to some of your users and in that reassessment, you might find out that an infographic might be a better way for them to learn that information. So that's where we try and change up this variability. And so if someone's taking a series of micro-learning tasks, you don't want every single one to have the same structure. You want to put in these different bits. And your users will tell you. You'll see if somebody gets stuck somewhere, or they don't click through on a link, or they're having trouble having all the information they need for the quiz. So you pay attention to all of that in the reassessment process and sort of switch up this content variability to make sure that your users are staying engaged and active. And again, using science to help make that possible. And again, as people, we like incentives, we like goodies. Whether that's getting a football phone when you sign up for a Sports Illustrated subscription, or points at your Starbucks. Those companies have worked very hard to figure out the right incentives. And so it's so true with learning that you need to do that same thing. Sometimes you want to have a program that is driving results, and you think about wanting to increase certain things. You'll define that goal, and then you'll figure out what the best way to drive your audience is to completing that goal. So whether it's rewards, getting to a, inviting them to a special meeting, whether it's a bonus, sometimes they just like behavioral things. Sometimes they just like to see their name up in lights. And so understanding what your users do through the data that you've collected is a huge part of picking the smart incentive. And really, you can't pick the smart incentive unless you've figured out what the goal is that you want everyone to get to. So sometimes that's a very short-term goal, sometimes it's a long-term goal, but knowing the goal and then figuring out the right answer, whether that's a contest or whether it's, a position on a leaderboard or hitting a quota, these things all contribute to people pushing themselves to do more learning or do more tasks in order to achieve that incentive that you've given them. And then finally, it just comes down to the fact that you need to be consistent, and whatever you're producing needs to be sustainable. When you create the content and author it, making sure that you are creating content that is easy for you to create, it's digestible for your user, and you're going to have the right team in place to sustain that cadence, because the last thing you want to do is put out a bunch of tasks and not have anything more for users to do or users to attain. So you want to continually be authoring. You want to be publishing it on a regular basis. Sometimes that means you have a program where the publishing is let's say automatic. So somebody completes something and that launches another task. Someone might meet a milestone, and because we've got data-driven tasks or data-driven learning, you're able to use the KPIs to release the next task to that person to push them even further. Deliverability, if you can't get it in the hands of the users, you're kind of stuck. So making sure that you can put it on multiple devices. We so often are out and about, even if it's just to go to the grocery store these days, to, we have our phone in our hands and we're checking messages on a regular basis. And so making sure that we can deliver the content either through an app or through a web-friendly page to get that information to your users in a timely fashion. And then again, getting the data, using some science, analyzing everything, and increasing adoption and the impact on the end user. So, one of the things that Dan's going to talk about next is sort of all of that data and what we see when it gets to that place of the analyze. So I'm going to hand it back over to you, Dan, to talk about data.
Excellent, Christina. Hey, thank you so much. And I got to say, I don't know if this quite dates me, but our family did get that football phone at one point. So, so thank you for bringing that up. So let's talk about the data now. And this is what is for us at Rallyware. This is one of the things that we love a lot. And really what we find interesting about it, and when we start these types of programs, or when we suggest to people when they start these types of programs, is, of course, when you have onboarding of content, and Christina, thanks so much for going through the science behind the content and learning and micro-learning. But when we're talking about reinforcement of changing behavior, now what we're looking at now is can we actually change that behavior? And can we prove that we're changing that behavior? And to do that, we need to have access to data. And so when you are looking at this first, one of the things that we say with people is that, give yourself some forgiveness if you can't give a lot of data. So, we start with little things, and then of course you can expand and expand and expand. But here's just some examples, and as it relates to the industry here is, maybe we want to look at, and we want to try to change the behaviors around time to first order, time to second order, or maybe the number of days in between purchases of a specific product line. We talked about smart incentives, different approaches along those lines. Maybe that's something that tied into there. We're just looking at the behaviors of driving purchases inside of a product line. Or let's say we want to talk about prospecting and the average number of digital touches before somebody purchases. And then we know that the behavior we want to drive there is to increase those touches. And then, of course, maybe it's parties or online meetings or whatever that may be to help drive that business. And then one more down the bottom is just maybe we're looking at recruits as well. So again, start with what data is available, and then we're going to start applying those microactivities. So when we look at microactivities, we want to split them up between two groups. Of course, we've got the learning microactivities like Christina did a great job presenting earlier, but we also have the business activities as well. So we'll get into those in just a moment. But these microactivities around learning, so, you know, are we going to have them watch a video, new business updates, go through tutorials of product launches, listen to specific podcasts? You know, one of the things that Christina talked about was delivery, right? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people on the call and just in general who consume so much education when they go for a walk or ride in the car or anything along those lines. So again, that delivery of that information, and then when they complete a quiz or answer a survey, something along those lines. But the ability to take that data and as it relates to the performance information, when we take that data and we now apply that and bring that together with the micro business activities. For example, publishing a social media post, or maybe sending an email or a text message and getting the information that's there. There's a lot of vendors out there that can really help with this type of information, getting this data, and then bringing it all together. Of course, that's a lot of what Rallyware does, but there's a lot of companies out there that can help gather this data and help produce this data if that's something that maybe you're lacking at that time. So again, some of these business activities, publishing social media, send out emails, scheduling parties, or maybe even following up with customers. Again, that one in and of itself is great because that one's a combination of maybe some e-commerce data and maybe a CRM platform of some sort. So again, the thought process there is that we know that microlearning is going to educate them. Now let's go ahead and bring all of this fun stuff to life. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to go into some fun things here where we actually took that performance activity, tied it with micro activities to take a look at business growth. So what we're going to kind of look at here, just so everyone is aware, is this is across a wide group of Rallyware clients. And we've tried to normalize this as much as possible. So we're going to see sales points off to the left. Of course, every company does it a little bit different, whether it's actual sales numbers or personal volume or qualified volume or whatever that is that you are looking for. So what we did is we said, okay, we've got all these activities that we want people to do, business activities, micro-learning activities, whatever those activities may be. And we want to see how they actually impact the overall sales performance of the users. So here we're looking at beginners, that's 1 to 24 tasks. Active users, 25 to 49. Very active is 50 activities to 99. And then super users are 100 plus activities. And you can see that sales increase, it does increase with the activities. And it's a great approach. But what's fun about it is, of course, you're going to see a transaction here, an increase in transaction numbers, and you would expect to see a correlation between that and the activities and sales. But what's fun is that, you know, we have customers that came back and say, hey, yeah, but an active consultant is an active consultant is an active consultant. So of course, if they're going to do more things, they're going to generate more sales. And of course, that's it, right? That's so critically important. And we do want to provide that environment to help them do more activities. But what we also do is we take a look and we say, let's take a look at the sales performance of individuals before and after they complete a certain number of tasks. And what's really interesting is when we craft, or when an activity is crafted the proper way, again, using your internal data and that information, you can start to really see how you lift groups of people that maybe might not be as active as they were previously. So let me kind of explain this chart. So the blue lines are the average sales for representatives before the science-based or a data-based training had been implemented and activities had been implemented. And so you can see what those sales are before that was implemented. And then the red is the sales after a system had been implemented and they had done a series of micro activities. Again, those could have been business activities, or could have been learning activities as well. And what I love to see here is that we had a pretty consistent field in sales across the board. And then as soon as we started to activate them, implement processes, and increase these just-in-time activities, we can start to see where as they grow in activities, sales grow through the roof. And I absolutely love this chart because it does show, hey, look, we're actually starting to change the behaviors of the field, which is, again, our whole goal. If they're going to do an action, let's get them to do an action that's going to be the best for them, best for helping their family, best for helping them to grow as individuals and business leaders. And then, of course, we looked at it from different points of view where we said, okay, well, let's look at performance of, say, an onboarding approach before a science-based activity, data-based activity program had been installed. And we looked at 90 days before, and then we looked at a new set of onboarding individuals and looked at them over a course of 90 days. And again, you can see when people aren't left to try to figure things out for themselves, and they have a plan that is custom and unique to them, we can see that that does impact sales quite a bit by a lift of approximately 70%. Now, what's fun is when we start to expand out, we're going to look at recruits maybe per 100 users, or parties or online events per 100 users. As people go through activities, you can see they start to get more and more confident in their ability to make things happen, in their ability to present, their ability to do the things that are needed for them to be successful. So you can see here, once they hit about that 25 task mark, they're into, on average, 47 new recruits per 100 users. That's fantastic. And then, of course, as you move through, we get up into super users, and then here you're into, of course, 79 new recruits, or 151 parties per 100 users. Again, it's fantastic when they get their confidence levels up to be able to do those activities. So that being said, what we want to do is just take a quick moment, and we want to show you what some of this might actually look like. And of course, don't forget question and answers. Throw whatever you want into the question and answer, and we'll get to that here in just a couple of minutes. So changing distributed workforce behavior, let's look at science and data together. So in this case, what we're looking at is, hey, you can see this little notification there that says, we noticed that you haven't created a party yet. Let's review the 3 simple steps. Now, again, this may be something that maybe they've been on board for 15, 20, 30 days and they haven't done this. Why is that? Well, maybe their sponsor or their upline leader or whoever is gone, or they don't feel like they have the right confidence to do that. So again, based on that, we want to make sure that we are providing that training. So again, this is just an example of one. Got a notification, and of course the micro-learning activities right there. And then when we talked to Christina talked earlier about breaking down big learning objectives into small micro activities. Again, this is important. Also, at the same time, we want to make sure that that when you do that, you can have a tendency to have quite a bit of training. We want to make sure that we are very specific to which ones are the most important for the right person at the right time. So again, we want them to learn, but we also want to reinforce, but also make sure that the content they get is very specific to where they are at in their process. And then what happens if you can't get data? Well, then try to find some way internally to get that data, whether that's through surveys or anything along those lines. But in this particular case, this is where we're, hey, why did you become a distributor? Or what are your goals? And then based on that kind of user-generated data, their own personal goals, of course, then you can modify around that as well. Not just company or specific performance indicators or company set goals, but also personal goals as well. And then we get down, and hopefully by this time, we're really starting to change behaviors, and we can see, hey, Jane, you're almost there, 1 week left. Then, of course, Jane does hit her numbers, and she's very excited. But also at the same time, we've unlocked new programs for individuals throughout this process. So we're going to jump into questions and answers. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'd love to get into some of those questions right now. Christina, I don't know if you've had a chance to jump in. If not, we can take a look. Oops, hit the wrong button. All right. So good questions here. So it says on one of the first slides mentioned SMART initiatives. What do you mean by initiative that's SMART? So Christina, that was yours. So if you wouldn't mind jumping in and tell us what do we mean by that?
Yeah, so I think we were talking about incentives, but I love the fact that you actually said SMART initiatives, because that's really the case too. So SMART, simply in this case, we're talking about having the right data to formulate an initiative or an incentive. So before you start out, hopefully you have a little bit of information to tell you who the people are you're training. Are they managers? Are they individual contributors? Are they salespeople? And as you think about the program that you're going to give them, would you onboard them in the same way? Let's just take that for example. And so you would use the little bit of data that you have, whether that's a little or a lot actually, and you could deliver content to those users based on their experience, how long they've been with the company, perhaps their title, how significant they are in the organization, and then maybe finally, do you know whether they're doing most of their work on a desktop or mobile? And so you can sort of push those things in the right direction for that person. So SMART simply means taking the information that you have and utilizing it to create the right content that you can deliver at the right time for the user.
Great, thank you, Christina. I appreciate that. And we have another one that says, when you say that we have, and I'll make sure I read it right so I don't miss initiative or incentive. When you say that we have to deliver mobile-enabled just-in-time learning, does that mean we need to have a native mobile application? And I'm going to jump in on that one.
Can I take this one? Oh, okay,
go ahead. Oh, I was just
going to say, The answer is absolutely not. What you need to have is whatever tool you're working with, one that is designed and thinking about mobile use. And so that could be that they have just really great design and UI. It's sort of my perspective. Like, if you can get your users to use it, it doesn't have to be in a native app. Now, there are some places where a native app is absolutely imperative, depending on your geography. Some countries, you know, people don't use a web browser. They're only going to be in a native app. So in that case, the answer is no, you need to have the native app. So I don't know, Dan, you might have a different perspective on it.
No, I think, I just want to add to that, because that was a very good point. I think one of the things that is really most critical is when you're thinking about doing a performance-based or a data-driven triggering of activities, you really want it to resonate where they are in their digital life cycle with you. So we don't want it to be in a completely different platform where they might not be getting those notifications, or they might not be understanding, you know, where they have to go to even get that information at first. What I think is really the more important question is, are we in their digital experience, their day-to-day activities? So that, I think, is a very important question. If it is in a mobile app, great, you know, Christina, thanks. But if it's not, it doesn't have to be. It just needs to be in their flow of daily information. So we have some other ones here. Let's see, it says, you talked about habit information. Do you have any data on how many activities result in a habit? Well, that's a really good question. I'll take this one, Christina, since I'm on the data side of things. You know, it's a good question, and the bottom line answer is no, because of the fact that what we want to do, of course, people are going to do those activities over a period of time. This is we're hoping, but we want to take the hope out of that. And so right now, when we're talking about these micro activities, one being a business activity or maybe one being a learning activity, what we might want to do, instead of you know, saying, hey, look, you've enrolled 3 people this week, and every time you've enrolled somebody, you're going to send them the same learning information. I think the important thing there is to change the activity based on how frequent that happens for them. So is it a training that you're sending? Is it a training and a business activity? Or is it purely a notification and then you monitor the performance? If nothing happens based off that notification of that performance, then maybe you do follow up with training, because maybe that behavior isn't necessarily set in stone yet. So what we would suggest is that monitoring of behavior as it relates to the activities and ultimately that end goal, and just look at how which activities we feed them based on that individual's specific situation. And then we've got one more question here, is can you explain a bit more how to associate employee performance with content consumption / learning? So Christina, I'll throw this one back over to you. Again, the question is associating employee performance with content consumption and learning.
Yeah, so employee performance can be really broad, right? So one of the things that I think is important when you're trying to create that content is understanding what motivates your employees first. So the great thing is that you can do a small amount of surveying and you can find out if people like to have recognition, if they're motivated by a small bonus, or if they're recognized, if they feel recognized when their manager says something to them. So an example of, someone really appreciating hearing from the management of the company, something that you can do is create a video from the CEO of the company saying congratulations, and putting that into the content plan. And when someone reaches a certain milestone at the company, they get that video. It's not, live, obviously, but it is like content that can be delivered that meets the needs of that employee and what makes them feel rewarded. You can also deliver a certificate that someone could print out and put on their wall and feel like they can look at their bulletin board and see that reward that they got. So, and then you follow that up with, congratulatory content with, here's what you do to hit the next milestone. So you reward, and then you deliver new content that helps push that person to the next level.
Love it, love it, love it. So Christina, actually, I've got one more for you. I missed one in the list here. So, and this one falls right into your wheelhouse. In the case of content, do you create it yourself, use external providers, or adapt to what the customer already has?
So I'd say yes. The answer is all three. The answer is really all three, because it really depends on how many resources you have, what kind of content you want to deliver. Sometimes you've got historical information and historical training that you can take and adapt and quickly, utilize that content. So, repurposing content is always a good thing. So I always say, start and look at what you have and implement that, assuming that you've not had, negative feedback on that original content. So assuming there was positive feedback, take what you have and break it down, use it in different ways to sort of match the microlearning theory. If you don't have any content at all, you have two paths. You can get someone to create content for you, or if you're kind of a lean, mean machine, you can talk to your users and have them help you create the content. So there's lots of different ways to create that. And it's kind of, the best thing I found is it's a mix of things. Like, you take some content that you've already got, you repurpose it, you talk to your user base, figure out what's missing, and then you work with them to sort of create more content. But it doesn't have to be a really heavy lift. One of the amazing things about microlearning and using a learning platform similar to Rallyware's is that, it can be really small bits of information. And these days, with our phones, we can take great pictures, we can capture quick videos. And I would say that because you're talking to your own audience, perfection is not what you have to attain here. Engagement is what you have to attain. And oftentimes people engage because they like the voice or the face of the person who's talking to them and training them. So find the voice that works, and I'd say implement that. That's really one of the key things to it.
Thank you so much, Christina. I want to jump in real quickly. We got another question that's popped in here, but real quickly, I do want to add a little bit on that. Is also, when content is relevant to the user and they're in the need for it, would you agree or disagree? What are your thoughts on the production quality of that content? I'd like to just maybe end on that, or that thought process, because a lot of times companies are faced with resource issues when it comes to actually the creation of content. But what's your take on that when it comes to when the content is relevant? What does the production quality or the resources, the amount of money we have to spend on creating that content, how much do we have to spend on something like that?
You know, my opinion is you don't have to spend a lot. You know, we've got word processors these days that make really pretty PDFs. You don't have to go spend gazillions of dollars to hire an ad agency. You can take video on your phone now that's pretty high quality. And especially if the content is like spot on and relevant to the user, whether you have exactly the right lighting or not is not as important as just good. Like, you just need to be good in terms of production quality. You don't need to be exceptional. You don't have to be Hollywood good, right? A little bit of lighting, a little bit of investment in sort of polishing things is going to take you a really long way. But the most important thing in what Dan was asking was, is it relevant? You can have the most beautiful content and spend a ton of money, but if the content's not relevant to the user, then it doesn't matter. So there's lots of ways to do it on a budget.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Christina, and I'm glad that we got a chance to do this webinar together and bring back the memory of the football phone. And
I will co-host with you anytime, Dan.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for listening in on the webinar. We will have it available. We'll have a link for the recording available. We'll send that out to everybody. But thank you so much, and stay tuned for what will be our next topic in the Rallyware webinar series. Again, thank you everyone for joining, and have a great day.